it will not necessarily be given us on our merits, we may get it with very little trouble. From a dim perception of the truth, many are loved with affection far beyond their deserts. Mr. Pontifex draws the ludicrous conclusion, therefore I, without desert, have a right to it. It is as if, on a far higher plane, we argued that because no man by merit has a right to the grace of God, I, having no merit, am entitled to it. There is no question or rights in either case. What we have is not a right to expect but a reasonable expectation of being loved by our intimates if we, and they, are more or less ordinary people. But we may not be. We may be intolerable. If we are, nature will work against us. For the very same conditions of intimacy which make affection possible also and no less naturally make possible a peculiarly incurable distaste, a hatred as immemorial, constant, unemphatic, almost at times unconscious, as the corresponding form of love. Siegfried, in the opera, could not remember a time before every shuffle, mutter, and fidget of his dwarfish foster father had become odious. We never catch this kind of hatred, any more than affection, at the moment of its beginning. It was always there before. Notice that old is a term of wearied loathing as well as of endearment, at his old tricks, in his old way, the same old thing. It would be absurd to say that Lear is lacking in affection. In so far as affection is need love he is half crazy with it. Unless, in his own way, he loved his daughters he would not so desperately desire their love. The most unlovable parent, or child, may be full of such ravenous love. But it works to their own misery and everyone else's. The situation becomes suffocating. If people are already unlovable a continual demand on their part, as of right, to be loved their manifest sense of injury, their reproaches, whether loud and clamorous or merely implicit in every look and gesture of resentful self-pity produce in us a sense of guilt, they are intended to do so, for a fault we could not have avoided and cannot cease to commit. They seal up the very fountain for which they are thirsty. If ever, at some favored moment, any germ of affection for them stirs in us, their demand for more and still more, petrifies us again. And of course such people always desire the same proof of our love, we are to join their side, to hear and share their grievance against someone else. If my boy really loved me he would see how selfish his father is, if my brother loved me he would make a party with me against my sister, if you loved me you wouldn't let me be treated like this. And all the while they remain unaware of the real road. If you would be loved, be lovable, said Ovid. That cheery old reprobate only meant, if you want to attract the girls you must be attractive, but his maxim has a wider application. The amorist was wiser in his generation than Mr. Pontifex and King Lear. The really surprising thing is not that these insatiable demands made by the unlovable are sometimes made in vain, but that they are so often met. Sometimes one sees a woman's girlhood, youth, and long years of her maturity up to the verge of old age all spent in tending, obeying, caressing, and perhaps supporting, a maternal vampire who can never be caressed and obeyed enough. The sacrifice, but there are two opinions about that, may be beautiful, the old woman who exacts it is not. The built-in or unmerited character of affection thus invites a hideous misinterpretation. So does its ease and informality. We hear a great deal about the rudeness of the rising generation. I am an oldster myself and might be expected to take the oldster's side, but in fact I have been far more impressed by the bad manners of parents to children than by those of children to parents. Who has not been the embarrassed guest at family meals where the father or mother treated their grown-up offspring with an incivility which, offered to any other young people, would simply have terminated the acquaintance? Dogmatic assertions on matters which the children understand and their elders don't, ruthless interruptions, flat contradictions, ridicule of things the young take seriously, sometimes of their religion, insulting references to their friends, all provide an easy answer to the question, why are they always out? Why do they like every house better than their home? Who does not prefer civility to barbarism? If you asked any of these insufferable people, they are not all parents of course, why they behaved that way at home, they would reply, oh, hang it all, one comes home to relax. A chap can't be always on his best behavior. If a man can't be himself in his own house, where can he? Of course we don't want company manners at home. We're a happy family. We can say anything to one another here. No one minds. We all understand. Once again it is so nearly true yet so fatally wrong. Affection is an affair of old clothes, and ease, of the unguarded moment, of liberties which would be ill-bred if we took them with strangers. But old clothes are one thing, to wear the same shirt till it stank would be another. There are proper clothes for a garden party, but the clothes for home must be proper too, in their own different way. Similarly there is a distinction between public and domestic courtesy. The root principle of both is the same, that no one give any kind of preference to himself. But the more public the occasion, the more our obedience to this principle has been taped or formalized. There are rules of good manners. The more intimate the occasion, the less the formalization, but not therefore the less need of courtesy. On the contrary, affection at its best practices a courtesy which is incomparably more subtle, sensitive, and deep than the public kind. In public a ritual would do. At home you must have the reality which that ritual represented, or else the deafening triumphs of the greatest egoist present. You must really give no kind of preference to yourself, at a party it is enough to conceal the preference. Hence the old proverb, "Come live with me and you'll know me." Hence a man's familiar manners first reveal the true value of his, significantly odious phrase. Company or party manners. Those who leave their manners behind them when they come home from the dance or the sherry party have no real courtesy even there. They were merely aping those who had. We can say anything to one another. The truth behind this is that affection at its best can say whatever affection at its best wishes to say, regardless of the rules that govern public courtesy, for affection at its best wishes neither to wound nor to humiliate nor to domineer. You may address the wife of your bosom as pig, when she has inadvertently drunk your cocktail as well as her own. You may roar down the story which your father is telling once too often. You may tease and hoax and banter. You can say "Shut up. I want to read." You can do anything in the right tone and at the right moment, the tone and moment which are not intended to, and will not, hurt. The better the affection the more unerringly it knows which these are. Every love has its art of love. But the domestic Rudesby means something quite different when he claims liberty to say anything. Having a very imperfect sort of affection himself, or perhaps at that moment none, he arrogates to himself the beautiful liberties which only the fullest affection has a right to or knows how to manage. He then uses them spitefully in obedience to his resentments, or ruthlessly in obedience to his egoism, or at best stupidly, lacking the art. And all the time he may have a clear conscience. He knows that affection takes liberties. He is taking liberties. Therefore, he concludes, he is being affectionate. Resent anything and he will say that the defect of love is on your side. He is hurt. He has been misunderstood. He then sometimes avenges himself by getting on his high horse and becoming elaborately polite. The implication is of course, oh, so we are not to be intimate? We are to behave like mere acquaintances? I had hoped, but no matter. Have it your own way. This illustrates prettily the difference between intimate and formal courtesy. Precisely what suits the one may be a breach of the other. To be free and easy when you are presented to some eminent stranger is bad manners. To practice formal and ceremonial courtesies at home, public faces and private places, is always intended to be bad manners. There is a delicious illustration of really good domestic manners in Tristram Shandy. At a singularly unsuitable moment Uncle Toby has been holding forth on his favorite theme of fortification. My father, driven for once beyond endurance, violently interrupts. Then he sees his brother's face, the utterly unretaliating face of Toby, deeply wounded, not by the slight to himself, he would never think of that, but by the slight to the noble art. My father at once repents. There is an apology, a total reconciliation. Uncle Toby, to show how complete is his forgiveness, to show that he is not on his dignity, resumes the lecture on fortification. But we have not yet touched on jealousy. I suppose no one now believes that jealousy is especially connected with erotic love. If anyone does, the behavior of children, employees, and domestic animals, ought soon to undeceive him. Every kind of love, almost every kind of association, is liable to it. The jealousy of affection is closely connected with its reliance on what is old and familiar. So also with the total, or relative, unimportance for affection of what I call appreciative love. We don't want the old, familiar faces to become brighter or more beautiful, the old ways to be changed even for the better, the old jokes and interests to be replaced by exciting novelties. Change is a threat to affection. A brother and sister, or two brothers, for sex here is not at work, grow to a certain age sharing everything. They have read the same comics, climbed the same trees, been pirates or spacemen together, taken up and abandoned stamp collecting at the same moment. Then a dreadful thing happens. One of them flashes ahead, discovers poetry or science or serious music, or perhaps undergoes a religious conversion. His life is flooded with the new interest. The other cannot share it, he is left behind. I doubt whether even the infidelity of a wife or husband raises a more miserable sense of desertion or a fiercer jealousy than this can sometimes do. It is not yet jealousy of the new friends whom the deserter will soon be making. That will come. At first it is jealousy of the thing itself, of this science, this music, of God, always called religion or all this religion in such contexts. The jealousy will probably be expressed by ridicule. The new interest is all silly nonsense, contemptibly childish, or contemptibly grown up, or else the deserter is not really interested in it at all, he's showing off, swanking, it's all affectation. Presently the books will be hidden, the scientific specimens destroyed, the radio forcibly switched off, the classical programs. For affection is the most instinctive, in that sense the most animal, of the loves, its jealousy is proportionately fierce. It snarls and bares its teeth like a dog whose food has been snatched away. And why would it not? Something or someone has snatched away from the child. I am picturing his lifelong food, his second self. His world is in ruins. But it is not only children who react thus. Few things in the ordinary peacetime life of a civilized country are more nearly fiendish than the rancor with which a whole unbelieving family will turn on the one member of it who has become a Christian, or a whole lowbrow family on the one who shows signs of becoming an intellectual. This is not, as I once thought, simply the innate and, as it were, disinterested hatred of darkness for light. A church-going family in which one has gone atheist will not always behave any better. It is the reaction to a desertion, even to robbery. Someone or something has stolen our boy, or girl. He who was one of us has become one of them. What right had anybody to do it? He is ours. But once change has thus begun, who knows where it will end? And we all so happy and comfortable before and doing no harm to no one. Sometimes a curious double jealousy is felt, or rather two inconsistent jealousies which chase each other round in the sufferer's mind. On the other hand, this is all nonsense, all bloody highbrow nonsense, all canting humbug. But on the other, supposing it can't be, it mustn't be, but just supposing there were something in it. Supposing there really were anything in literature, or in Christianity. How if the deserter has really entered a new world which the rest of us never suspected? But, if so, how unfair! Why him? Why was it never opened to us? A chit of a girl, a whippersnapper of a boy being shown things that are hidden from their elders. And since that is clearly incredible and unendurable, jealousy returns to the hypothesis all nonsense. Parents in this state are much more comfortably placed than brothers and sisters. Their past is unknown to their children. Whatever the deserter's new world is, they can always claim that they have been through it themselves and come out the other end. It's a phase, they say, it'll blow over. Nothing could be more satisfactory. It cannot be there and then refuted, for it is a statement about the future. It stings, yet so indulgently said is hard to resent. Better still, the elders may really believe it. Best of all, it may finally turn out to have been true. It won't be their fault if it doesn't. Boy, these wild courses of yours will break your mother's heart. That eminently Victorian appeal may often have been true. Affection was bitterly wounded when one member of the family fell from the homely ethos into something worse: gambling, drink, keeping an opera girl. Unfortunately, it is almost equally possible to break your mother's heart by rising above the homely ethos. The conservative tenacity of affection works both ways. It can be a domestic counterpart to that nationally suicidal type of education which keeps back the promising child because the idlers and dunces might be hurt if it were undemocratically moved into a higher class than themselves. All these perversions of affection are mainly connected with affection as a need love. But affection as a gift love has its perversions too. I am thinking of Mrs. Fidget, who died a few months ago. It is really astonishing how her family have brightened up. The drawn look has gone from her husband's face, he begins to be able to laugh. The younger boy, whom I had always thought an embittered, peevish little creature, turns out to be quite human. The elder, who was hardly ever at home except when he was in bed, is nearly always there now and has begun to reorganize the garden. The girl, who was always supposed to be delicate, though I never found out what exactly the trouble was, now has the writing lessons which were once out of the question, dances all night, and plays any amount of tennis. Even the dog, who was never allowed out except on a lead, is now a well-known member of the Lamp Post Club in their road. Mrs. Fidget very often said that she lived for her family. And it was not untrue. Everyone in the neighborhood knew it. She lives for her family, they said. What a wife and mother. She did all the washing, true, she did it badly, and they could have afforded to send it out to a laundry, and they frequently begged her not to do it. But she did. There was always a hot lunch for anyone who was at home and always a hot meal at night, even in midsummer. They implored her not to provide this. They protested almost with tears in their eyes, and with truth, that they liked cold meals. It made no difference. She was living for her family. She always sat up to welcome you home if you were out late at night, 2 or 3 in the morning. It made